Okay, good afternoon. This is the Industrial Relations Committee, and I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have one bill on the agenda today. It is House Bill 292, authored by Chairman Hembry. So I'm going to ask Chairman Henry, you ready to present your bill?
Yes.
Okay, he's just going to do it from up here. So the floor is yours, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your help, and thank you for your committee members. I'm going to be working from a committee substitute that's in your folders. It's the substitute to House Bill 292, and try to give you just a little bit of an overview about this issue and how it came about. If you're not familiar with the administrative assessment fee, it's collected by the Department of Labor, and it has been being collected for many years, and it's going to sunset on December 31st of this year, and that's why this bill is presented today, because we want to either take some action to prevent that sunset from happening and make it continue for 5 more years or not. And we've also made some other provisions too on this amendment. But just to basically give you an overview from what I understand, back in 1987, the state of Georgia wanted to look at the issue of the unemployment insurance and be more aggressive with the employee tax and basically getting people back to work. So they set up this proposal and codified it in state law, whereas 0.06 per employee was assessed by the employers, and that amount increased by 0.08 in the year 2000 per employee. And the fee was supported and still is supported by many in the business community as an intent to get the taxes in sight so that the individuals can get back to work. And that's primarily what the mission is, because the Department of Labor realizes that, and they've turned this program into one of the probably most successful programs in the country. Now, current law says that the Department of Labor can charge and collect a 0.08 administrative assessment tax, which will be paid by each employer for each employee, and it must be reported on the employer's quarterly tax or wage report. And then the commissioner is authorized to deposit the funds as a clearing account in the unemployment compensation fund created by Georgia Code, provided, however, that such funds shall not be considered as part of the unemployment compensation fund. The commissioner is further authorized to transfer these funds to the state account in the state treasury. And the General Assembly, us, we're authorized to appropriate to the department all the funds that are collected. Now, this program, as I said, has been successful in the past. Basically, the 53 career centers around the state of Georgia are primarily funded by this assessment fee. It's an intensive job search services. Over 640,000 people have registered in previous years to receive skills from workshops, resume assistance, veteran services, and applicant screening. They've had job fairs, employer job operations, and so this fee that is assessed, as you can see, has been successful since the legislature enacted it way back in 1987. Currently, Georgia ranks one of the top states in the country, the top 5 in getting people back to work, and this is possible through the reemployment services the state offers. They are also a great resource for employers to identify potential employees. So if we don't act, these programs will end. There will be no more funding for them effective at the end of this year. And so that is the point of the legislation. If you'll go through the sections, basically Section 1 identifies how the program was started back in 1987, on through the current reserve ratios that are in place in current law. And you can see we're basically changing the dates until 2016, which will be the next expiration date. One other thing that we do, and I'll let some of the others who are here today explain the pros and cons of this, deals with the reserve ratio calculation. And currently it's set at 35%, and the Labor Commissioner will have the option of imposing an increase in the overall reserve ratio of 35%. This changes it up to 50% for the computation. And again, my point with this measure and with this substitute is to put this on the table so that we can have further discussions. I think that once the General Assembly is completed, I would like, as a committee, for us to have hearings this summer, and we can do that. We don't have to set up a specific study committee or a commission. I can call for hearings because we've got some serious problems that we need to deal with before next year, and so hopefully we can come together as a group and a committee and try to find some solutions to these problems. That's all that I would like for. I would like for some others who are obviously better versed in this than me to maybe have a chance to speak, and then I'll try to answer some questions once it's all wrapped up. Is that okay?
Sure. So you
if some of these other folks, I think the labor commissioner's here, and we'd like for him to speak. I think that's important, and there's some other folks here. So just hear pros and cons on both sides. Okay.
We will have time for questions, but on request of the chairman, we'll hear from members of the public first. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak on this bill? Mr. Bowen, would you please step up to the mic and introduce yourself and tell us who you're representing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Roy Bowen with Georgia Traditional Manufacturers Association, but I'm also authorized today to speak on behalf of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and the Georgia Paper and Forest Products Association. Is that better? All right. Roy Bowen with Georgia Traditional Manufacturers Association, also authorized to speak on behalf of the Georgia Chamber and the Georgia Paper and Forest Products Association. I'll hit Section 3 first, Mr. Chairman. That was the last section you talked about, and it really mirrors the provision of Senate Bill 151, which passed out of the Senate Insurance and Labor Committee last week. And that provision simply gives the Labor Commissioner the authority for one additional year, beginning January 1, 2012, to impose an increase in the unemployment insurance tax rates that is less than the statute requires based upon the current statewide reserve ratio. And this is an authority that has existed with the Commissioner since 2004. Currently, the authority allows up to a 35% increase, and that's currently in place as we speak. This provision bumps that up by 15 basis points to 50%, and that really is needed, we believe, to prevent further deterioration of the negative balance of the fund and hopefully cap the amount that the fund needs to borrow from the federal government to pay benefits. Now, without this change, and the real reason that we need to enact this change is without it, rates will go up to 100% of their current statutory limit. And really, we believe that that is just too great of an increase for employers to handle in this very fragile recovery. Currently, Georgia has borrowed some $634.5 million to pay unemployment insurance benefits. This extension will give the department and interested parties in this committee the opportunity to work towards a more permanent solution to restoring trust fund solvency and repaying the federal debt. There's no question that the UI system needs a thoughtful and thorough review and analysis and rewrite. Now, we also support very strongly the provisions of the bill that extend the administrative assessment that allows the department to develop innovative programs to return the unemployed to work more quickly, and the extension of the new employer rate. So as a total package, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it has our full support, and we would hope it would have the support of the committee, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Would you recap, I guess, just quickly, so you can help me understand it, would you recap what you said, that the issue, if we don't act or make these changes as of the end of this year, those rates are going to go up 100%?
Right. They would go up to 100. The rates would increase to 100% of current rates. Right. Because of the reserve ratio, which is, what is it, minus? 49%. Well, they're 35% now, but they can increase to 100% of the rates if we don't do anything. And the provision here in Section 3 gives us a year, basically the year of 2012, to try to address some of these
concerns before these things happen.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bowen, I have a question for you. As you may or may not be aware, of a staffing company, and so we deal with unemployment all the time, deal with the Department of Labor all the time. I also am very proud of the way we've handled ours, because we have the absolute lowest modifier that is possible within the state of Georgia, because we do such a good job of managing that. Based on what you're saying, if it goes to 50% or goes up, what in effect will it cost businesses such as mine that are doing it the right way? We're getting people back out to work. We're managing our claims. What financial impact will it have on companies such as ourselves?
Well, if no action is taken, Representative, that rate will go to 100%. Right now the surcharge, the former labor commissioner exercised his authority to increase the rate by 35%, which is the statutory limit. So,
again, my main concern, not necessarily my business, but other businesses that are currently doing it right. You're saying that if we don't enact this, that there'll be a dramatic increase to all employers, even those that are doing it the correct way.
Correct.
But if we pass this as it stands right now, there will be virtually no impact on either increasing our deposits or the modifier that would require those deposits to go up?
Yeah, the modifier is something separate and apart from this. Now,
I mean, this is administrative fee, but I know ultimately it's money that goes back to the DOL.
Yeah, this simply provides the commissioner the authority that he has today to increase the rates up to 35%. Today, this gives him the authority to go to 50% should he choose to do so. The thinking of the business community was 35%, you're still going to lose ground. You're still going to be paying out more than you're bringing in, and it further exposes us to federal borrowing. Even at the 50% level, that's not going to really help in the long run towards restoring trust fund solvency. Something more dramatic is going to have to happen down the road for that to occur.
One final follow-up, and this is a joke, but I'll say it anyway. Would you consider a friendly amendment that allowed me to pay the Department of Labor electronically instead of having to mail a manual check every quarter?
I think that would defer to the Labor Commissioner on that.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at two different things here. Am I correct?
Actually, three. We're looking at the extension of the new employer rate, an extension of the administrative assessment, and the extension of the authority for the commissioner to set a rate that would prevent the 100% kicking in.
I want to speak specifically about, I believe it's 0.08%.
Mm-hmm.
That we're using for Center of Innovations. Is that correct?
For that and a number of things, yes, sir.
Can you tell me how much money that brings in annually?
I believe that's about $10 million. That was the information provided by the Labor Department.
I've got that. You might want to wait and ask when I get up there, because I've got those numbers for you.
Okay, very good. I'll just hold my questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Further questions of Mr. Bowen? Further questions? Okay, Mr. Bowen, thank you very much. Les, would you please step up to the mic and introduce yourself and tell us who you're representing?
Members of the committee, my name is Les Schneider. I'm an attorney with Wimberly & Lawson, and I'm just here today as somebody who has practiced in this area a long time and been involved with the development of the current law that we're presently with. And I, like Mr. Bowen, are of the view that the system is broken, but I probably feel it's more broken than he does. I wanted to first address what Representative Hamilton talked about. Under the current situation, obviously what you do with this bill today is there will be a tax increase for all employers. Now, if your base rate was 1% There's already a 35% surcharge on the 1%. Under this bill, we're going from a 35% surcharge to a 50% surcharge. Now, it's more money, and I'm sure there's plenty of business people out there that'll say, well, we don't want any increase whatsoever. But I agree with Roy that the difference between 35 to 50 is not going to take us out of the dive that we're currently in. We are where we are because previously somebody thought it was a great idea when we had $2 billion in our trust fund to have a tax holiday where employers paid literally no money into the fund. And despite my great intellect and my great powers of persuasion, I was completely unsuccessful to convince people that perhaps we ought to give somewhat of a discount, but not a 100% tax holiday. As a result, as Roy indicated, we're $634 million in the hole. We'll probably be more in the hole as time goes on. The problem is that you not only have to eventually pay that back, but then you have to fill up the fund with some of your own money to get there. And under the current system, I just don't see that we're ever going to achieve those goals without tremendous, tremendous surcharges on the rates. I think one of our biggest problems with this system is the fact that when the times are best, the rates are the lowest. And when the times are bad, we sock it to employers in the worst way possible. And I think that for at least 20 years, I have made this argument. People said they're going to work on it. We're going to come up with a better system. And in fact, there was a time where a gentleman who used to work in the Labor Department who has since passed away, John Lawrence, I sat with him and some other folks from the department, and I think we actually came up with a system that would be better. But to go to your question, Representative Hamilton, I think the times where people could have a rate less than 1%, or 0.5% or 1/4%. I mean, you start getting that low, it's almost like, why bother sending somebody a bill? I mean, you're not really collecting enough money to ever get this thing straight. If we could get 90% of the employers somewhere between 1 to 3%, considering that the new employer rating starts out at 2.7, as you know, and then try to do something with the wage base to maybe even reduce that, we might be able to actually have a system where it's stable. I mean, I think employers, more than anything else, want stability and predictability with this tax. They don't want it seen jumping up and down every single year. They want something that they know this is what it's going to cost us, basically. Now, if you have an employer who has a lot of turnover, they're going to reach that 5.7 rate regardless. I mean, they're always going to be bad. But I think, and I understand Representative Hembury talking about getting people together and doing it, and I trust him and his counterparts to hopefully do that. But I am telling you that if we don't, we're going to be looking at, I think, becoming a prisoner of the federal system, where we'll end up with a wage base of something like $16,000 instead of $8,500, and I think that's going to be something that Georgia employers don't want to see. So as to the bill, I don't see any real objection to the first part. I mean, obviously, if we don't have this administrative assessment, Georgia employers aren't going to save any money because that money is just going to go into the fund. And I think that previous labor commissioners, and I'm sure this labor commissioner, will use those funds in a way that is a positive to getting people back to work. Because the faster you get somebody back to work, that's the best protection you have to your fund. But I think a serious mistake was made in past years, and I think we have to try to correct that. But the only way it's going to get corrected is it's going to take a lot of political courage to say, we're just going to revamp this system because it's not working. I think on top of that, there would be no change in money. As to whether you want to go from 35% to 50%, I know Roy has indicated his and his group's favor of it. I am not sure it makes much difference. I think it's really a blip on the scale when you see how much money we're in the hole. But if you all feel that the majority of employers are not going to get too excited about this, and at least it will bump it up a little bit, it's certainly it's certainly a lot better than increasing it another 65% to the 100% surcharge. But please, the real message, and the only reason I'm up here today, is to say that we can't keep making the same mistake year after year. And we're not alone. Other states are in the same predicament. And when I hear people start talking about having bonds and floating bonds to pay for unemployment benefits, et cetera, I think that's the last thing we want to borrow money on. I mean, we've got to have a self-sufficient system that has a tax system that does it. And I guess, Representative Hamilton, you know, to you especially, I mean, you see it in your business and how important it is to get people back to work. The problem is that even if you're doing a great job, there's a certain amount of money that's needed in the system, and even if 90% of the employers are doing as good a job as they can, this tax system, especially when you have serious dips in the economy, it just can't survive. We're going to have this up and down unpredictability in rates, and again, you know, passing the 50%. You know, we'll get a little money into the fund, but if you really look at the graph, it does very little. But I would just really please request from the chairman that we really do some very hard study over the interim, because if we don't get this right, we're going to really be in boat with other states, and we're going to rue the day that we ever had that tax holiday. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the members? None. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Yes, ma'am. Please step up to the mic and introduce yourself and tell us who you represent, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Elizabeth Apley, and I represent the League of Women Voters of Georgia. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and in most significant respects, many significant respects, I'm in agreement with the author, of course, that the problem is one that is serious and requires attention, and with my colleague, Mr. Schneider, that what this bill does is to continue us on the downward slide that led us to insolvency in December of 2009. The trust fund, as Les indicated, was at $2 billion in 1999 before the tax holiday. When the tax holiday was completed in 2003, we'd gone down from $2 billion to $700 million. But the tax cuts did not end there. They've continued every year since then, and that's what you see in House Bill 292, a continuation of those tax cuts. It's those tax cuts combined with the tax holiday that, or you could have taken either one. Either one would have undermined the solvency of the trust fund. We keep using the word surcharge, and it's important to look at those surcharges. Basically, the surcharge is a safety net. Every June, the department takes a numeric measure of the health or adequacy of the money in the trust fund. They call that the statewide reserve ratio. The numerator is the balance in the trust fund. The denominator is the amount we pay, the total taxable wage base for the prior year potential liability. Economists agree that a healthy number is 2. Okay, we're at 0 or below 0, and we have been since December 2009. And the reason that we look at that reserve ratio is to make adjustments in what employers pay in order to avoid insolvency. So since 2003, since the end of the tax holiday, what Georgia has done is suppress the surcharge, the triggers that were supposed to automatically kick in by statute, as you see in Section 3, were suppressed. And instead of the triggers automatically occurring because the health of the trust fund or the balance of the trust fund was too low, what happened is we shifted that from an automatic statutory occurrence to one that vested discretion in the Commissioner of Labor and gave him a range. 0 to 35%. The proposal here is to raise that to 50%. But I would suggest to you that if you put that burden on the commissioner, you're likely to see what you've seen from the past 7 years, the past 8 years. Our conversation with the commissioner, the former commissioner of labor, is that he never exercised the discretion to impose the surcharge in the past 8 years, even as the trust fund moved inexorably towards insolvency. And so if you believe that we need to impose a surcharge of 50% instead of 100%, then that should be mandatory in the legislation rather than burdening the commissioner with that responsibility. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that this bill actually does 4 things. In addition to suppressing the surcharge, it also suppresses the tax rate for new employers and for other employers, and continues to divert 0.08% to the administrative assessment. And I think the commissioner is going to talk more about what the administrative assessment does. But it's important to look at the fact that that $25 million is money that other states that are insolvent, that owe money to the federal government, as Georgia does, are choosing to impose as a special assessment on employers rather than taking the money out of the general revenue. Because the money that has to be repaid on interest is due October 1, it cannot be taken out of the trust fund. Other states have chosen to generate those interest repayment funds by imposing a special assessment on employers. Rather than taking that money out of the general fund that goes for education and public health and public safety. And so we certainly agree with the other speakers that the system needs to be addressed. It's a bad system to raise taxes when times are at their worst, but the reality is that if Georgia's statutory tax system had been allowed to function as it was written, we would not be insolvent now. And this bill continues us on that road without addressing the long-term problem. There has been federal legislation proposed that would waive the interest payment for 2 years. It provides the opportunity for the state to have 60% of the principal, that's $634.5 million forgiven, if we come up with a plan that restores us to long-term solvency and raises the federal taxable wage base so that the tax is spread out more broadly without being raised higher. So we would support your consideration of that option.
Thank you. Questions of the members? Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Apley.
you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Anyone else in the audience? Anyone else? Okay, so I guess we're going to save the best for last. Commissioner Butler, welcome to the committee.
Well, it's good to be back.
Absolutely.
I was just sitting where y'all were sitting this time last year. This is a very complicated subject matter. I know it is, and from sitting where you're sitting, we've had an idea about possibly coming over here one day with some of your counterparts in the Senate and having a class on the UI tax system so we can catch everybody up, because I know that was one of the most difficult things for me when I was on this committee, to catch up to exactly how it worked and how it was computed. Representative Hampton, I want to go ahead and address your question real quick. Do you know what your tax rate currently is right now, what your base rate is? 0.8. Okay, now that actually is going to be shifted to 0.06. Right. And the funny thing about now that's on the federal rate. You know what your state rate is? Okay. Well, actually, the lowest you can be is 0.03, the state rate. But that's still a great rate, especially for running a temp agency.
And I guess that's part of my point is that I'm in an industry that historically has a very high rate. And so I just want to make sure, and I support what you're doing. These are not meant to be difficult questions. We've talked about this. I guess I just want to understand that and understand the need for a base coverage. But I also know one of the reasons that some of my counterparts and some businesses have such a high mod is that they really don't work it very hard. You know, we understand what Department of Labor rules are. I would say that we If a person is eligible for unemployment insurance, they get it. If they've not, if they've violated any of the rules, our employment rules, we go to hearings, we do it, and so we work very hard to keep the rate where it should be. And so my only concern with any of this is I just want to ensure that those of us that do it the right way, that provide insurance, that administer insurance coverage for those that should receive it, but also fight for those against those that should not receive it, I want to make sure that we're then in turn not unduly punished for just because we happen to employ people. And I would say that, not about my business, but there's a number of employers that I know that do it the right way. They aggressively, there's a term, I didn't coin the term, but, predatory applicants. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for public funds. And so we just want to make sure that if they deserve it, they get it. If they don't, we're going to fight it with everything that we can to preserve our rate. And that's my main topic of this. And it's all meant to be very friendly.
Yes,
but,
I understand.
okay.
And to your point I was going to make, for example, if you're at the .03, which is the lowest rate that we have, which actually it actually goes up. It's actually .025, but we won't get into that. They just shorten it for the decimals. But right now, it's where it's at. If it went to the plus 50, you're looking at going to instead of being at .03, you're at .04, which basically means per employee you're looking at going from $2.55 a year to $3.40 a year if you're in that lowest bracket. However, I also need to caution one thing as this goes forward. All the speakers are correct in the fact that we do have to get a handle on this trust fund issue for several reasons. One thing is, as a state, every year that we hold a balance, whatever that balance is, we are obligating ourselves to an interest payment. This one is estimated to be somewhere between 20 to 24 million for this year. So every year that we hold a balance, especially a large balance, is the more interest that we're going to have to pay. So there's one area that we definitely have to be cautious about as we go forward. Also, another thing we have to be cautious for, unless the federal government intervenes or changes their current rules, and right now I'm just going to present to you how the facts are today. I make no assumptions of what Congress is going to do, what Washington's going to do, because until they actually do it, it's all, I call it fantasy. Until they actually make change or do things differently than how it currently is, how things will progress going forward. The longer we hold a balance and continue to borrow money, there's a federal unemployment tax component to all this, and they call it the FUTA. And those of you, I'm quite sure Representative Hamilton is very familiar with this, since seems to be quite well versed on what his rate is. That FUTA rate, every year that we hold a balance with the federal government and we owe them money, that FUTA rate will increase. Right now, your FUTA rate is around is actually 0.08, and it will be 0.06. It's actually going to be adjusted down. But going forward, that rate will keep increasing until it tops out at 6%. So whereas you may be holding your rate on the state side very low, and I applaud you for doing that. My business did the same thing. So I know what it's like to do the system and hold it right and keep your rate low. But as we continue to owe money to the federal government, your federal rate will increase. So down the road, you could have a situation where you have the lowest state rate possible. However, your federal rate could be the highest possible, which is not a situation we want to find ourselves in. So we always have to keep that in the back of our minds, what it can happen down the road if we don't address this problem of the money we owe. And that's kind of my 2 cents on the rate part. Now, if you want me to go back and address the AA fund, I can do that too. You had a question about how much is collected. Excuse me, everything's on a different piece of paper. In 2010, the total collections was for the AA fund was $23.3 million. Of that, the Department of Labor was appropriated just a little bit less than $15 million. Now, one of the things also keep in consideration, through a federal rule and through federal guidelines, going forward, we can use some or all of this AA money to help pay for the interest payments that we're having to owe. It would be unwise to use all of it because we do pay salaries and we pay for programs that help get people back to work faster with this same money. But we can use some of it, and so that's also another, I think Ms. Apley may have spoken to that. So that is already part of the current plan right now to help come up with the money for the interest payments, is to use part of the AA money for the interest. However, we can't use all of it. That would pretty much kill all the programs that we have funded with that, and we do not have replacement funds for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions of members? Representative McKillop.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. We keep talking about the loan from the federal government for the fund and the $634 million. What are the terms of the loan? How is it due? When is it due? What is the interest rate? And what are the steps by which we start going down a road to where people are paying 6% to the federal on the FUTA?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's go for that. I have a lot of questions all built into that one sentence right there. Let's see. The interest is due basically in October. The interest rate is a little over 4%. Walt, is it 4.0869? Now, where did they come out with that number? I don't know, but let's call it 4%. That's the interest rate. And right now we're at $634 million. We project to be somewhere around the neighborhood of, well, our numbers may have changed with these last, our unemployment did not, well, we didn't get favorable numbers that we were hoping for last month, and so we've started to change our calculations, but you're probably looking at easily us having to borrow around $750 million, possibly $800 million as we go forward to meet our obligations.
More?
No, total. In total. I mean, I think somebody at one time last fall had said that we were going to borrow, $1.4 billion. That was a little excessive. However, as we go forward, I mean, keeping our rates like we are, and all speakers before me are correct, we do need to take a look at our current system, and we do need to make some changes. Now, of course, a lot of things can happen. Our economy could boom. You could see, record employment and all that. I mean, of course, that's a lot of ifs, ands. Or we could see another recession if things in the Middle East go bad. So all these things kind of factor into it. But just on a very conservative estimate going forward, keeping the rates exactly where they are right now, we will actually in 2015 owe more money then than we do now. That's a problem. But now I'm also in total agreement. We cannot hit the business community all at once with a large tax increase. I am in favor of keeping this manageable going forward, because the best medicine to get us out of this hole is to put people back to work, and we cannot put people back to work by overburdening our businesses who are putting people back to work. And so it's a very delicate balancing act that we're having to deal with going forward. There's a lot of things that could happen in this next year. I think we should proceed with caution as we go forward. If some of the things that we have seen the federal government and Congress propose do pass, they could be very favorable and help us. We're not as bad a shape as a lot of other states. Our neighbors to the north, North Carolina, they owe around $2.5 billion on their unemployment trust fund, which is a number that I would hate for Georgia to have to get into a situation where we would have to manage. So going forward, as far as on the rise in the FUTA rates, that's going to depend on a lot of what happens in Congress right now. As it sits right now, starting in 2012, you'll see it increase by 0.03 a year for the next 2 years, and then after that they can actually add surcharges on that to advance the increase towards 6% even faster if they believe, and this is a judgment call on the federal government, on USDOL, if they believe that we are not being aggressive enough in paying back the loan, they can put additional surcharges or they can advance that interest rate on the FUTA at a quicker rate than the 0.03 that it's already in kind of in their rules. Did I answer all of those?
So it goes up 0.03 per year for each year that we carry any balance, regardless of if we made the interest payment or not?
Correct. Now, if you don't make your interest payment, they automatically ramp it all the way up to 6. So that's an option you do not use.
It's going to go up 0.03. I'm sorry. And what is our rate right now from the feds?
Right now we have the lowest. It will be 0.06 for this year. I believe that's right.
And so
right? No,
the fact that we carry a balance means
how much is it?
0.3. Our rate right now is actually 0.8 FUTA.
FUTA. That's what I was talking about.
So it'll go to it will go to 0.11.
11,
because we're
no,
carrying a balance.
1.1.
Right.
Yes. And then point.
Is there some thought that 4% is a pretty decent loan rate? At this point, I mean, why we're not talking about ramping up the amount that we need to pay back is that we're getting a 4% loan from the federal government for the businesses, as opposed to taxing them greatly.
No, well, it's just the terms that we have to deal with. I mean, right now in the current in the current atmosphere that we're having to deal with, we are having to pay out more than we're bringing in. So it's just, I mean, this is just a system we have to deal with. There's not a thinking behind it like this is a great rate and we want to keep borrowing money. I mean, that's not it. It's not like an investment or anything. A matter of fact, I mean, one of the reasons why we have been looking at bonds is there is a chance that if once we get stabilized and we know what the amount, we know that we've stabilized or not going to have to borrow money in the future, there is a possibility, somewhat remote. We're not going to be able to come up with a solution this year because we're still looking at the legal parts to it, that we may can bond the money that we owe the federal government and get it at a cheaper interest rate, which would also allow us to manage our tax system a whole lot better. But now right now that is pie in the sky. We can't really talk about that yet because that's just one of those things that we, in a perfect world, would be great to do if we could do it in the right kind of way. However, right now we are still looking for the legal options on that. But that's the reason why if you hear people talk about bonding the indebtedness on the trust fund, that's what they're talking about. We are working with the Attorney General's office and looking at what avenues we may have. A lot of states have done that and done it quite successfully. Probably the best success story in that has got to be Texas. They managed their crisis with it and did a very good job. That's where we first heard about it, and then we started looking at other states that have been using it. And something we might bring back to you at a later date if we see that there is a legal avenue in order to do that.
Thank you.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Commissioner. I'm sorry you inherited what you did.
Thank you.
But I appreciate you being able to deal with it. I am concerned a little bit about this administrative assessment fee, and I don't really understand it. $23 million that was collected, and roughly 15 was actually, I guess, appropriated back through the general budget to the Labor Department. Is that correct? So does the balance stay in the general budget for the General Assembly to spend as they wish?
Well, apparently.
Is that the way that works?
Well, it's not supposed to, but that's what's happened. So.
Okay. Now, so what's collected has to come through our appropriations process, and you're receiving whatever portion we so decide. So really this .08 is not really all coming to the Labor Department.
No, yeah, well, up until about 2003, the full amount did do that. There was some change in thought and thinking in the process, and then, I guess, during hard times, they started looking everywhere they could, and yes, some of the money did start being taken out of that fund and used in the general fund.
Could you share with us how the appropriated amount, the roughly $15 million, how is that spent?
Several different ways. Probably we have to spend our money in certain ways, Department of Labor, and we have very strict rules by the federal government. You have the UI process, which is the managing of the unemployment, the trust fund, and also of the benefits. Reemployment services is where most of this money is used for. Like some of your big examples, like if you have, when we work with, say, the Department of Economic Development, and they're looking at a new employer coming in, and they do like a large employee search or a large job fair. We use a lot of that money to basically to pay for that. We also use it in all of our career centers across the state for reemployment services. We also use it to help provide training to people who are looking to get jobs. Basically, how the system is set up right now is to basically come up with programs to get people off unemployment and get them back into the workforce, because that saves money in the UI Trust Fund, and has. And so it's a good system. Can it be used better? Most definitely. You can look at other states that have revamped how they do their AA funds. Mississippi is a great example. They have some innovative programs they've used to help get people back to work and use it for almost for economic development purposes. And we're going to be making some changes in how we spend ours. However, right now during this current crisis, a good bit of this money is probably going to be diverted toward making the interest payments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple more questions, if I could. Do we get any matching funds from the federal government based on what we collect from our employers? for this money?
No.
So I guess my question is, if we did not appropriate this at all, what would happen to these programs? Is there monies coming from the feds that could be redirected to fund this, or is that prohibited?
Well, I mean, some of the funds, we use these funds to supplement and enhance some current programs that are allowable. For the most part, most of those programs would have to be shut down. If you did away with this, you'd have to shut them down. And basically what happened is you would cripple the Department of Labor's ability to get, the services that we provide, the reemployment services, the employment services, when we try to help people do their job search, all that, you would cripple our ability to get people back to work faster. Is basically what it comes down to. Right now, Georgia is in one of the top 5 states in the nation when it comes to reemployment services and getting people back to work faster.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that right now there are some rough times for everyone, and I don't know that the numbers would add up presently based on what we're going through. I think we're adding like 70,000 per month new people to the unemployment list. And there's a lot, like 20,000 a month, I understand, rolling over into the extended unemployment. That's no reflection on you or your team. It's just what we're going through. The question is that this $24 million that we're collecting for our employers, is it better spent here, or is it better reinvested back into their businesses to employ more people is the question.
Okay, understand, this is not an additional tax.
It is not?
No, it is not.
No, this bill is not. This is
No. I'm talking about the .08 that you're talking about. Okay, if you did away with the AA, you're not going to change an employer's tax. Not one bit. It does not change it. You're not going to give them .08 back to their business. This is .08 of collected UI funds. It's a way that we can take, it's a federally certified program, which we basically take a percentage of our current tax and use it to help get people back to work in order to save money in the unemployment trust fund to try to keep the rates low. So it's not going to, if you did away with this, you're not going to see your tax rates change. You just won't have these programs.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you just take it out, I guess the credit's got to go back to somewhere. But we won't argue that point.
No. I mean, it's not a credit. It's basically we're able through it's a fairly certified program. Other states use it in different ways, where you can take a percentage of your SUTA, the state unemployment tax, the current amount that you're collecting.
Okay, so you're telling me it's mandated by the federal government that you can take a portion of what you collect.
It's not mandated. It's allowed. It's allowed by the federal government. It's a fairly certified program.
I'm saying the rate that the federal government charges won't change, is what you're telling me.
No, it has no effect on any of your rates.
I did not know that, and I think you're clearing it up.
Yeah, this is just a way for the states to be more creative and help you come up with programs to get people back in the workforce quicker.
Okay. One last question, if I could.
And not come out of the general fund.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for clearing that up. I did not understand that. In lieu of all the uncertainties that you've alluded to yourself, would it be possible, and would you be amenable to changing these dates from 2016 to 2012 so that we can have time to look at this again next year, because things are up in the air? We're not sure what the federal government's going to do on unemployment rates and things like that, and the payback of the trust fund monies. And
are you talking about on the AA fund?
I'm talking about all of it, every bit of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the AA fund. I mean, I would rather not have to come back in 1 year to reset the AA fund.
Well, it's all in the same bill. I mean, we could do it all the time.
But it's a separate issue. Now, on the rates, the UI rates, it's already set for just 2012. It's only set for 1 year.
You're extending this program, I believe, to 2016. Is that not right?
That's just on the administrative assessment. That's the only part of this bill that has that extension in it. That and the new employer rates.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Hembry, is that correct, the way you see that?
That's my understanding.
Says I read it too.
Okay.
Are you?
I'm done. Thanks.
I got one. You said that the administrative assessment is not an additional tax.
That's correct.
But employers pay UI.
Correct.
And then they pay the administrative assessment. Okay, so the UI, it's skimmed off of the UI
Exactly.
that you collect.
Just think
Gotcha.
about it as just, yeah,
Excuse my verbiage there, but that's the way I see it, is they collect it and they just skim a little bit off the top and keep it. Yeah, it's okay, I got you. All right, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner, welcome aboard. You've got a tough battle ahead of you, I think. All the money, unemployment money now, is that Fed money? Are we broke as far as the state is concerned?
yes.
So it's all Fed.
Yeah, but, well, I mean, you say it's Fed. I mean, it's a loan. Any of the part that we're paying out on initial claims right now, we have to borrow that money right now.
Okay.
Now, our borrowing should slow come April, because that's when most of the unemployment tax comes due. Our largest amount of tax that we receive in the unemployment system comes after the first quarter, because remember, we only tax on the first $8,500 of your salary or your pay, or however you how you want to term that, and most of that happens in the first quarter. So we'll get a large chunk of money received on the state unemployment tax from this first quarter, and we should probably be good unless something disastrous happens. Maybe, you know, right now, if I had to look at the current unemployment numbers and our current clip that we're on right now, we may very well have to borrow some money at the very end of the year before we go back into the next year, because we're not going to collect enough to cover what we're currently having to pay out right now. Of course, I mean, things can change. Things could get better, and you could see the initial claims have a dramatic decrease. You can see, you know, there's a lot of things can happen. And, you know, and there's always a chance we might not have to borrow, but we still have to keep paying back, you know, the principal. I mean, it's kind of a tough situation. You need to get money back in your trust fund, but you also got to pay this back, and you got to pay out claims. So, I mean, we're literally hemorrhaging money is going out of this account about, you know, is quick, if not quicker, than we're getting in it.
Now, the money collected to the end of the quarter, this or first of the quarter, whichever it is, this money comes back to us. Does that reduce our debt?
Briefly. Would it? No. That money basically goes into our trust account with the federal UI, and then we draw it down as needed.
Okay. Now, the $24 million that we pay, where are those funds going to come from? We're going to have to budget that $24 million?
Yes.
And that'll be the case from here on out?
Every year until we pay this off. The interest will have to be budgeted.
It's going to be a long time.
At the current rate, yes, it will be.
Yeah. So we need to kind of find a fix to this.
Well, we're working on it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify something you just said, just to make sure everybody understands this. It's $8,500 per employee, but that's also per employer. So if someone makes $8,500 from me, my company pays that, and then they turn around and get another job with another company and over $8,500, that tax is paid again that same year. And if they turn around and get another job that same year, that same tax is paid again. So I just want to clarify to the members of the committee, it's not necessarily just per employee, it's per employee, per employer.
Well, yeah.
So it could be that first quarter, but staffing company, it's not unusual for someone to work for me and several other companies. So the reality is the companies may be paying a much higher percentage for that employee.
And just think about this as kind of like the chairman knows this quite well. It's just like any other insurance product out there. This is an insurance policy, basically, that all employers have in the state of Georgia. And when you get a new employee, you're basically taking out an insurance policy for them in case they become unemployed. I mean, that's how this thing kind of works. And you have premiums, so to say, you pay that. So you have to kind of think about it in those kind of in those kind of terms. And some, and that's kind of how I came to grips with how it all kind of goes. Is started thinking about it as an insurance policy, and these are premiums, and we're paying for their insurance policy.
Further questions of the members? Representative McKillop.
Just one. The $24 million, you indicated that we need to appropriate it for the interest, and that is it's pretty much necessary that we pay it so that we don't automatically go to the highest rate on the federal. I assume you've been in touch with the governor's office. Is that
Yes.
in the 12?
We are working on that with OPB, the governor's office, and with our legislative leaders in both the House and the Senate. Yes, we're quite on top of that because it's actually quite more catastrophic than just the going up to the 6%. They can also decertify your unemployment insurance program, which I don't think they would do. However, let's not take a chance. I mean, it has catastrophic effects if you don't make that interest payment.
We're going to trust you to follow that.
Yes, we do.
Okay, Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner, I want to thank you again. I did misread, and I do understand that that's a one-year thing, and I appreciate that. And we do know that we can't get back to an even number. I mean, we've got that trust issue, and you may very well be back. The sad thing is I don't know that it's good to put it in your hands since you're an elected official and you actually have to be the one to make the decision to raise the rates. But if you want to take that responsibility, we thank you for it.
Well, I would much rather not have it. If you would like to do a friendly amendment, I'd be happy for you to go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Because the only way you look at it, if you change the rate from the base plus 100% to a base plus 50, you're looking at a $250 million tax break between now and 2012. No matter how you slice and dice it, this is a tax break. Because in code right now, they will get base plus 100 unless we act. And that is unsustainable.
What is unsustainable?
For a business to get hit with that much tax right now in this current economy, that much of an increase all at once is too much.
Okay. Further questions of the members? All right. There's no more, Commissioner. Thank you very much. Okay. Is there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this bill? Anybody? Okay.
Okay. Well, as you can see, we have some problems. And when I took on this responsibility as chairman of this committee, I understood the problems we faced. I think in the past few years we've read about the unemployment rate, and we now are dealing with it as a General Assembly. And this committee needs to take some action. So I hope that you'll help me and understand my thinking with this. And I always try, as chairman of a committee, try to come up with a solution that reaches the goals of all involved. And that's where I need your help, because I need you to be involved as committee members to help us solve this problem as best we can with the help of the commissioner. So the way I look at things is we want to try to reduce the impact on as many people as possible so that they're not hit so hard. And the reason I drafted this substitute the way I did was in hopes of doing that, so that it wasn't just addressing one thing, but addressing more than one thing. First, to extend the administrative assistant, the administrative fees. I think that's important. You said it was important. And these programs are available. I think the business community realizes this is important. 53 centers across the state. The reemployment program is a good program, and I think that helps businesses. So that's one issue that I think that we're trying to address here by extending that for 5 years. The other issue that was brought to my attention was that we want to try to reduce the impact on businesses. We don't want to hit businesses with a 100% increase starting January of 2012. We don't want to do that. I just don't think that's the right thing for us to do, because I think it'll burden the businesses and stifle economic growth. And then finally, I want to try to work with the Commissioner and the Department of Labor and try to come up with a solution so that we can maybe get some kind of control on this, as Mr. Snyder said, and have some hearings throughout the summer. But for now, this is what we have. So this is my temporary solution to our problems in this committee substitute. That was my thinking behind it, and so I'll do whatever the will of the committee is in moving forward, or holding this back, whatever you want to do. This is out there for you to decide.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, before we do anything else, is there objection to adopting the committee sub? Is there objection? Okay, so we're officially now working off of LC 36183S. And what is the pleasure of the committee?
Proper time, I'd like to make a motion that we do pass LC 361838.
Okay, now is the proper time, and you have just so moved. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Smith. Discussion? Representative McKillop?
I just had I was just wondering what the real dollars were, and maybe Representative Hamilton can help me. When you talk about we're going from whatever your base rate is, whatever it is, and it goes up either, if we do nothing, it goes up double. If we adopt this, it goes up half, 50% of double. What kind of real dollars are we talking about? Sure.
I mean, basically, what we're talking about, the current, the flat rate is 2.7% of payroll on the first $8,500. So you take $8,500, multiply it times 2.7%, and that's where you're at. And then, obviously, depending on your experience, that number either goes up or it goes down. So you're not talking about a huge number. And then at the federal level, it's 0.8%, and it's on the first 7,000. So that's only $56, I guess, on an annual basis. So that's the amount of tax the employer is paying. So it was pointed out, and I would agree. Sometimes we look at these percentages and they seem huge, but the reality is overall we're not talking about a huge number. But obviously you get into a number of employees, and it also is, especially when you're paying this that first. It's a cash flow issue your first quarter or two of business.
Thank you, Terry. Yes.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I'd like to clarify that this is up to the discretion of the commissioner. Is that correct? It's not mandatory. Correct. Yes.
Chairman Hembry. He waves. Okay. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? Okay. We have a motion of due pass on the committee sub in a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Okay. It's passed. Mr. Chairman, you're on the rules. There being no further business, we will stand adjourned without objection.